the early morning hours of May 14, 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson was on the phone with his father. He's been out in rural Minnesota for nearly an hour, much of it walking through farmland, trying to find his way home after his car slid into a ditch. His parents were searching for him, flashing their headlights, calling out his name, but they couldn't find him and he couldn't see them. Brandon was describing what he saw: fields, fences, the sound of running water. He was getting infuriated. He had just passed another fence when he suddenly shouted, "Oh shit," and then silence. His parents called out to him, "Brandon, Brandon, can you hear us?" Nothing. They tried calling back. His phone rang and rang and rang, but Brandon never answered. He's been missing for over 17 years. His car was found, but Brandon, he vanished without a trace. And what makes this case so haunting is that Brandon did what most people would do. He called for help. He stayed on the phone. He tried to guide his parents to him, but something went terribly wrong. This is the disappearance of Brandon Swanson. Brandon Victor Swanson was born on January 30th, 1981, in Marshall, Minnesota. He was the oldest of two children, raised by his parents Brian and Ann Swanson, in a tight-knit, loving family. Marshall is a town southwest Minnesota, population around 13,000. It's rural, agricultural, the kind of place where everybody knows everyone. Brian worked at the local grain elevator. Annette worked for the school district. They were deeply rooted in their community. Brandon graduated from Marshall High School in 2007 and immediately enrolled at Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Canby, about 30 miles from home. He was studying wind energy technology, a program he was genuinely excited about. Brandon had big plans. He was planning to transfer to West Community College in Council Bluffs, Iowa, in the fall to continue his education. It would have been his first time living away from home, and he was looking forward to the independence. Those who knew Brandon described him as smart, responsible, funny, and deeply independent. He was close with his family, especially his younger sister. He worked part-time at local Hy-Vee supermarket to help pay for school. He was, by all accounts, a good kid with a bright future. But there was one detail about Brandon that becomes critically important to this story. Brandon was legally blind in his left eye due to childhood optic nerve damage. He had a small scar above his left eye from the injury. He wore black wire frame glasses to help with his vision and depth perception. On May 13, 2008, Brandon finished his last day of classes for the spring semester. Finals were done. Summer had officially started, and like thousands of college students across America that night, Brandon went out to celebrate. Brandon attended at least two small gatherings that evening. The first was in Lind, a tiny town about 7 miles southwest of Marshall. The second was in Canby, where his college was located. There was alcohol at these parties. Brandon drank. His friends confirmed that, but they were adamant. Brandon did not appear drunk or overly intoxicated. He seemed normal. He was in control. Around midnight, Brandon decided to head home. The drive from Canby to Marshall should have taken about 30 minutes on Minnesota State Highway 68, a straight shot south. But for reasons that have never been fully explained, Brandon didn't take Highway 68. Instead, he took the back roads, unfamiliar gravel roads winding through the rural farmland. Some people speculate he was trying to avoid police. After all, he had been drinking, even if he wasn't drunk. Others think he simply thought the back roads would be faster. Whatever his reasoning, it was a mistake. At some point between midnight and 1:54 a.m., we don't know exactly when, Brandon's green Chevy Lumina slid off the road and into a ditch. The car wasn't damaged. Brandon wasn't hurt, but the wheels were elevated off the ground, hanging over the edge of the ditch. No matter how much he revved the engine, the car wouldn't move. He was stuck. Now here's the first major question in this case. What happened in the time between Brandon leaving the gathering and calling his parents at 1:54 a.m. Canby to Marshall is a 30-minute drive. Even on back roads, it shouldn't take close to 2 hours. So where was he during that time? Did he stop somewhere? Did he get lost on unfamiliar roads? We don't know, and Brandon never explained it. At 1:54 a.m., Brandon called his parents. "I'm in a ditch," he told them calmly. "The car's stuck, but I'm not hurt. Can you come get me? Brian and Annette Swanson didn't hesitate. They got into their pickup truck immediately and headed out into the night. Brandon stayed on the phone with them, trying to explain where he was. I'm near Lind, Brandon said. He was confident. He had been to Lind earlier that night. He recognized the area. He could see lights in distance that he believed were coming from the town. Brian and Annette drove to where Brandon thought he was. They flashed their headlights repeatedly, trying to signal him. Brandon said he couldn't see them. They drove up and down the roads around Lind, flashing their lights, calling out into darkness, but there was nothing. Brandon, confused and irritated, got back into his car and flashed his own headlights. Parents saw nothing. This is where the case starts to become truly bizarre. After several minutes of failed attempts to find each other, Brandon made a decision. He could see lights in the distance, lights he was certain were coming from Lind. He would walk towards them. His parents could meet him at the parking lot of a local bar called the Linwood Tavern. I'm going to start walking, Brandon told his father. I'll meet you there. Brian dropped Annette off at home. She wasn't feeling well and continued driving, staying on the phone with his son. For the next 47 minutes, Brandon walked through the darkness of rural Minnesota. He described what he encountered. He was crossing fields. He was climbing over fences. At one point, he mentioned hearing the sound of running water, later believed to be Yellow Medicine River, though Brandon didn't know it at the time. He sounded annoyed, but lucid. He wasn't slurring his words. He wasn't incoherent. He sounded like a tired, annoyed college student trying to get home. But here's the thing that haunts this case. Brandon was legally blind in one eye. He had depth perception issues, and according to some reports, his glasses may have been left in his car. Why would someone with significant vision problems possibly leave their glasses behind before walking through unfamiliar farmland in the pitch-black darkness of night? Some sources dispute whether the glasses were actually found in the car, or if they were never recovered at all. But if they were in the car, it raises an enormous question about Brandon's decision-making that night. At one point during the walk, Brandon said something that would become a key piece of evidence later. Not another fence, he muttered, frustrated, infuriated. And then, just seconds later, oh shit, the line went silent. Brian called out to his son, Brandon, are you there? No response. Brian and Annette tried calling him back immediately. The phone rang and rang and rang. Brandon never answered. By the next morning, the calls were going straight to voicemail. At 6:30 a.m., more than 4 hours after Brandon went silent, Brian and Annette Swanson walked into Leon County Sheriff's Office to report their son missing. And here's where the system failed Brandon massively. The officer they spoke with told them, essentially, not to worry. Young men Brandon's age stay out all night, all the time. He probably met up with friends. He's probably fine. He has the right to be missing. That's a direct quote. The right to be missing. Brandon's parents were furious. Their son had called them for help. He had been on the phone with them for close to an hour. He had gone silent mid-conversation. And now police were telling them to just wait? It took hours of pressure from Brian and Annette before authorities finally agreed to start searching. But by then, crucial time had been lost. Later that morning, investigators obtained Brandon's cell phone records, and what they discovered changed everything. Brandon's calls, all of them, had been routed through a cell tower near Taunton, Minnesota. Taunton is about 25 miles away from Lind. Brandon wasn't anywhere near where he thought he was. The lights he saw in distance, they weren't Lind. How does a 19-year-old become so disoriented that he's that far off course and has no idea? The search immediately shifted to the area around Taunton, close to the town of Porter along Highway 68. And that afternoon, they found Brandon's car. Brandon's green Chevy Lumina was discovered in a ditch along a gravel road near Taunton, right on the Lincoln County line. The car was exactly as Brandon had described, stuck at an angle, wheels elevated, unable to gain traction. No damage, no signs of struggle. The doors were unlocked, the keys were missing, and according to some reports, Brandon's glasses, the glasses he needed because he was legally blind in one eye, may have been inside the vehicle. Bloodhounds were brought in immediately to track Brandon's scent. The dogs picked up a trail starting from the abandoned car. They followed it through fields, along gravel roads, towards an old abandoned farm. The trail led them 3 miles from the car, directly to the banks of Yellow Medicine River. And there, at the water's edge, the dogs lost the scent. At that time, the Yellow Medicine River was running high and fast due to spring runoff. In some areas it was shallow enough to wade, and in others it dropped into deeper channels. The current was strong. Investigators immediately suspected Brandon had fallen into the river and drowned. But here's where the things get complicated. According to Brandon's mother, Annette, the bloodhounds may have indicated Brandon's scent on the other side of the river as well. This suggested that Brandon may have crossed the river either by wading through it, by falling in and climbing back out the opposite bank. If he did cross the river, wet and disoriented, in roughly 40-degree temperature, hypothermia would have been a serious, potentially fatal threat. But despite extensive searches, helicopters, divers, sonar equipment, volunteers combing both sides of the river for miles, nothing was ever found. Not the body, no clothing, no cell phone, no glasses, no personal items, nothing. For over 17 years, investigators, volunteers, and true crime enthusiasts have tried to answer one question: what happened to Brandon Swanson? Let's break down the major theories. Theory number 1 is that he drowned in the Yellow Medicine River. This is the most widely accepted theory among law enforcement. The case for it is that Brandon mentioned hearing running water during the phone call. The bloodhounds tracked his scent directly to the river's edge. The river was high and fast moving that night due to spring runoff, and the temperatures was just under 40 degrees, cold enough for hypothermia. But then there's some cases against it. Despite the extensive searches, including sonar and dogs, no body or evidence has ever been found in the river. Brandon's phone continued ringing for some time after he went silent, eventually going to voicemail. That doesn't prove anything by itself, but it's one reason people question what happened in those minutes. According to Annette Swanson, dogs may have indicated Brandon's scent on the other side of the river, suggesting he may have crossed it. If he was in the river, it's possible his remains were missed or moved, but the lack of recovery after years remains a major question. I think Brandon encountered the river. I think he may have tried to cross it, but the lack of evidence after so many searches make it hard to feel fully certain. Second theory is that he fell into an unmarked well or cistern. This theory was proposed by Darren E. Delzer, a volunteer firefighter who became deeply invested in the case. The argument for it is that Delzer noted that Brandon said "not another fence" just seconds before exclaiming "oh shit." Rural areas can contain unmarked wells, cisterns, culverts, and old farm structures, some hidden by bush or darkness. If Brandon, legally blind in one eye, and possibly without his glasses, was climbing fences in pitch-black farmland, he could have stumbled into a hazard like that. Wells and cisterns can be deep. A fall could incapacitate him immediately, and because many of these hazards can sit on private property, not every location is thoroughly checked early out. There's some supporting evidence for this theory. Brandon's sudden exclamation suggests something unexpected happened. His scent trail ended abruptly at the river area, which could also reflect terrain changes or contamination. Some properties were difficult to search quickly due to access, liability, and farming schedules. But there's still some problems with this theory. No specific well or cistern has been confirmed as a likely location. This theory remains difficult to prove without a discovery. My take on this theory is that this one is one of the more plausible alternatives to drowning. Rural terrain is full of hazards people don't think about until something goes wrong. Theory number 3 is foul play. Some people believe Brandon encountered someone on that rural road, someone with bad intentions. The case for it is Brandon's sudden silence suggests something unexpected happened. His body and belongings have never been found. The dog's losing his scent could mean he entered the vehicle, but there's more cases against it than cases for. There is no physical evidence of foul play. No witnesses reported anything suspicious. Brandon's car showed no signs of struggle. He was on the phone with his father the entire time. If someone's approaching him threateningly, you would expect some indications. I personally don't lean towards foul play here. It's not impossible, but it's not supported by any evidence. Then the last theory for today his theory for disorientation and exposure. Here's what I think happened. Brandon had been drinking earlier that night, not enough to appear drunk to his friends, but enough that judgment and spatial awareness could have been affected. Combined with being legally blind in one eye, possibly without his glasses, in total darkness, on unfamiliar back roads, Brandon became disoriented. He really believed he was near Lind when he was actually 25 miles away. That's severe disorientation. I think Brandon encountered the Yellow Medicine River. I think he either tried to cross it and fell in, or he waded through it and made it to the other side, which would fit with the reports about dogs indicating scent across the river. If he made it across but was soaking wet, roughly 40-degree temperatures, hypothermia could have set in quickly. Hypothermia causes confusion and poor decision making. In rare advanced cases, it can also involve paradoxical undressing. I think Brandon, cold, wet, exhausted, and disoriented, wandered further into farmland and either collapsed from hypothermia in an area that wasn't thoroughly searched, fell into a hidden hazard like a well, culvert, or cistern, or succumbed to exposure in dense bush or a low area that concealed remains. The fact that his body hasn't been found doesn't mean it isn't out there. Rural land is vast, and early searches don't always cover every private acre thoroughly. The oh shit moment? I think that's when Brandon hit a sudden hazard. The river bank, a ditch, uneven ground, or something he didn't see until the last second. This doesn't require a villain. It requires darkness, terrain, and disorientation. When Brandon Swanson disappeared, the response from law enforcement was catastrophically inadequate. His parents were told their son had the right to be missing. Hours were wasted, critical time lost. Brian and Annette Swanson could have let their grief consume them. Instead, they turned it into action. In 2009, just 1 year after Brandon's disappearance, they worked with Minnesota State Representative Marty Safer to draft new legislation. On May 28, 2009, Brandon's law was signed into a law by Governor Tim Pawlenty, with Brandon's parents and his younger sister Jamine present at the ceremony. Brandon's law requires law enforcement to immediately take a missing persons report when someone is reported missing under dangerous circumstances, regardless of their age. Police to immediately conduct a preliminary investigation to determine if the person is truly missing and in danger. Agencies to promptly notify all other law enforcement of the situation, and the reporting agency to remain the lead agency, eliminating jurisdictional confusion. Additionally, if a missing person is not found within 30 days, law enforcement must actively gather DNA samples, dental records, x-rays, photographs, and fingerprints. Brandon's law has been adopted by 4 other states. It's credited with saving lives by ensuring that investigations begin immediately during those critical first hours. Representative Marty Safer called it one of the most important bills I authored in my 14 years in the legislature. He kept the pen used to sign the bill as a reminder of its significance. Brandon Swanson has never been found. His case remains unsolved, but his legacy, the law that bears his name, continues to protect people across America.